Time now for today's Focus report. Italy has long been asking its European neighbours for more burden sharing when it comes to migrants crossing the Mediterranean. But France isn't letting migrants enter from the northern Italian border town of Ventimiglia. In July, Italy's deputy foreign minister said, quote, "It doesn't seem like France wants to help us concretely." But as Aurore Dupuis reports, there are French civilians helping migrants.
Ventimiglia. Sunshine, clear blue sea. French tourists flock to the Italian city. Just across the border, it's more affordable than the French Riviera. Holidaymakers, but also migrants who escape boredom before trying their luck. France is only 10 kilometers away. Hundreds of migrants are stuck at the border, living under a bridge in the heart of Ventimiglia. Ethiopians, Eritreans, most are from war-torn Sudan. Amongst them, Ismail. He managed to sneak into France last night for the 5th time in vain.
It took me 7 hours to go across the border. I climbed up the mountain, went down the other side, and did everything I could to escape the police. It was really tough. I've badly hurt my leg. This morning, the police caught me and sent me back to Italy.
Like Ismail, most migrants cross the border at night. A perilous journey. Nearly 20 are thought to have died in 2 years. If they get across, survivors often end up in this village, home to Cédric Herrou. The French farmer grows poultry and olive trees. He also helps those who stumble across his back garden, a crossroad for migrants.
Right there, it's the road that links Ventimiglia to Breil-sur-Roya. Just above, there's a tunnel that links both cities. And just across, there are mountain tracks that go through our village from Ventimiglia. And behind the crest, it's Italy.
Herrou has recently been convicted of helping smuggle refugees to France. His farm is filled with tents. Migrants call it Campo Roya. Over the past 2 years, Herrou has provided shelter to hundreds of people, including children. But now police officers surround his property. Only a handful of migrants sleep here.
When the state uses the justice system as a tool to dissuade people from helping others when justice doesn't seem to be independent, it's scary.
Exhausted, these migrants have risked their lives crossing the Mediterranean to escape war and poverty. Joseph left Sierra Leone 2 years ago. Born during the civil war, he fell victim of religious tensions. Although the conflict ended in 2002, Joseph says he'll never return home.
I don't want to live a miserable life in the street. So I decided to stay in the village. I want to become a gardener. In France, I can stay, I be Muslim, and then no one can disturb me. I get my better life. But in Africa, they will disturb me. They tell me if I don't be part of this society, they will kill me.
In the face of despair, volunteers from across the world have decided to take action.
We cook every day, and every day we drive by these gentlemen.
Under tight surveillance, Olivier drives through the border every afternoon. The organic farmer brings food and water to migrants, more than 60 kilos of fruit from his own field. Volunteers from Germany, Holland, Great Britain have joined Cédric Herrou's cause, distributing more than 800 meals on a parking lot next to the bridge. Olivier has a ritual. He queues with the migrants as an act of solidarity.
You speak English, my brother? You don't?
We try to forge bonds with them. We spend time with them. There's always a football to play with and start a relationship.
A small break before police play a game of cat and mouse at the Franco-Italian border.
All we're doing is taking people, sending them back over and over again.
Under EU laws, one can only apply for asylum in his first country of arrival. Most of these migrants entered Europe via Sicily. Now they're forced to stay in Italy, even if they want to join their family elsewhere. As night falls, we meet Abdelatif at the Ventimiglia station. He's tried to reach Paris a dozen times, hiding in the toilets of a train.
When you're in the wagon, passengers sometimes report you to the police. Even if authorities don't spot you, someone will tell on you.
Who tells on you? The Italians?
No, the French. The laws in France are just, but they target migrants. Policemen are extremely violent with us.
Abdelatif was sent back to Taranto, the boot of Italy, more than 1,000 kilometers away from the border. It took him several days before he could reach Ventimiglia again. Despite heavy police presence, he says he's determined to sneak out one way or another. The next morning, Abdelatif heads to a Caritas center for some breakfast. A French nun distributes chocolate sandwiches and a high-fat drink, usually given to the elderly or the sick. There's not enough for everyone. Only the weakest are allowed a bottle.
So, you're not in France yet?
I'm going to rest all day because tonight is going to be a sleepless night. I'm going to try and cross the border.
Abdelatif dreams of sleeping in a proper bed, not under a filthy bridge. Drinking water from a tap, not from the Royal River. Once in France, he'd like to study French and leave bad memories of Italy behind. Others have given up their dream of living in Europe. Dean is among the 300 migrants to have found refuge at the Red Cross. He says he's had enough and wants to return to Ghana, where his 2 boys await. He left in spring last year, hoping to start a business in Libya, but life there was unbearable.
They kidnap people, beating, they kill some, asking for money. They tell you, call your parents from your country to send you money. If you don't have any, consider yourself as a dead body. So all this is so horrible and everybody is running out of the country.
Dean arrived in Italy a month ago. He's already asked Italian authorities to send him back to West Africa.
Okay, I'm in Rome, Sister A.
His dream, buy a camera, become a journalist, and condemn unfairness.
I think justice is something we have to look for. Yes, black, we deserve to be free, we deserve justice.
Dean's decision to return home isn't common. Most of the 60,000 migrants who arrived in Italy this year still hope to find an El Dorado in Europe.
And joining me now in the studio is Shoshana Fine, Research Associate at Sciences Po's Centre for International Research. Hello, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Now, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has said himself, quote, "We haven't listened enough to Italy's cry for help on the migration crisis." But is his position any different to François Hollande's?
No, absolutely not. We're seeing pretty much the same policies in terms of migration. In fact, I'd even go back to Sarkozy. I'd say we're seeing a solely securitized approach where France is trying to close its borders and push migrants outwards, be it to Italy or be it beyond Italy to Libya or to Turkey or other third countries.
And today, I mentioned in the bulletin Jean-Claude Juncker's address at the Parliament in Strasbourg. He said that there's been progress on the issue of migration, and he even highlighted Italy's perseverance and generosity in helping to manage irregular migration. But Italy really has had enough, and as I said, it's been crying for help to its European neighbours for years, and France isn't the only country that isn't really listening.
Absolutely. I think it's very difficult to speak about progress when we're looking at what's happening to migrants and potential refugees, right? These are people who are coming here to try to seek asylum. We've seen less arrivals this year coming to Italy because the borders have been built up, but we've seen proportionally more deaths. So there's obviously something going wrong there. These deaths are a direct consequence of European policies. So speaking about progress is very problematic. Also, we haven't really seen any real solidarity among EU member states with the whole hotspot initiative. We've still seen that states are really, particularly France, but many others, are lagging behind in terms of welcoming their quota of refugees.
A deal was struck, like you say, a quota deal in 2015, and France hasn't come anywhere near to meeting its commitments, but other countries haven't either. But also, could you explain, is that quota just for refugees or economic migrants as well?
No, actually, the quota is for asylum seekers who have a very high recognition rate. The only problem with that is that we're creating a discriminatory practice within this mechanism. So, for instance, if we're only accepting a certain nationality of refugees or asylum seekers who have a high recognition rate, what's going to happen to the others? How long are they going to stay in these hotspots, which have been criticised time and time again for not treating these people in a dignified manner?
And if we go back to the region our report was focusing on, so the southern France, northern Italy, the border by Ventimiglia, we saw that there are locals helping migrants, but they face fines, not just in France, but in Italy as well.
Yeah, what we can see is a real tendency in France and across Europe towards criminalising humanitarian assistance, and particularly with in mind any kind of humanitarian assistance that is trying to become politicised, so contesting European migration policies. What France, legally speaking, allows to happen is indifferent humanitarian assistance. So humanitarian assistance only applied exceptionally and only out of our compassion. But when it comes in thinking in terms of rights, this is what seems to threaten the French state.
You said that there were European policies that are contributing to a higher death toll, making the crossing riskier. Which policies are you referring to?
The fact that for instance, if you take the case of Frontex, its mandate is to intercept irregular migration. Its mandate is not to save lives. So what we've seen is less and less European means that are going into missions to save lives at seas. Focus is very much on securitising the border. And now what we can equally see is our efforts to criminalise NGOs that are there as a consequence of European policies that are trying to pick up the pieces and stop or at least reduce the amount of migrant deaths in the Mediterranean.
Italy introduced a code of conduct that some NGOs aren't happy about. Could you tell us a bit about that? And are NGOs not behaving as they should then for Italy to do that?
Yeah, this code of conduct, I think, is very problematic. You know, these NGOs already had a code of conduct, and that was international maritime law. What the Italian code of conduct introduces is it very much renders the missions of these NGOs, which are supposed to be a humanitarian mission, into also a security one, because it imposes upon NGOs a police officer on board of the boats. So it really kind of making an imbrication between surveillance and saving lives.
Now, one thing France has done is try and at least speak to the leaders of Libya, because there are rival governments. How important is Libya's stabilisation to the resolution of this crisis, the migrant crisis?
I think Libya's stabilisation is important for all actors, but I think even if Libya becomes a stable country, and I think we know that we're a very long way away from that, I think that it is not Libya's responsibility to host all of these migrants and refugees. Europe should take its part. If Europe still wants to be a territory of asylum, then it needs to offer pathways for asylum seekers to reach Europe. So by blocking all mechanisms to reach Europe and keeping them in Libya, I think is problematic, even if Libya was respecting these people's rights, which it's not. It hasn't signed the Geneva Convention. Numerous cases of torture and inhumane conditions, of kidnapping, of slavery have been documented in Libya. So I think really that this is something that we cannot imagine for a very long time.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis, Shoshana Fine.